Welcome again. Welcome to Conversation. A pleasure. Welcome to the program. One of the dearest friends of the host of this program in the whole universe, and that being Dr. Sidney Greenfield. He's been a guest umpteen times on Conversations, and he's got a CV resume. He's an emeritus professor, anthropology, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and he's got a CV curriculum vitae that would knock your socks off. I don't know how he's ever had time to get to a television studio writing 37 pages of 8-font articles and books and things he's written on all aspects of sociology with a particular, or anthropology, with a particular emphasis on the country of Brazil. And he's also a person who understands the importance of trying to expand some ownership as a way of forming capital and distributing demand along the Kelso model. And Sidney, so good to see you. Welcome. Glad you got here.
Thank you, Harold. It's a pleasure.
I can't bring any more. I should have some drums or something to say how much I admire your academic work.
This is fine.
But we do want to talk about it. You were just talking to me off the air, and we were going to talk about it. There's these projects going on that you've read some of Henry George. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Henry George, Progress and Poverty, and that, and the economic questions of Louis Kelso and ownership and some of these other things. But you're telling me about some things that are going on, and we want to highlight in the program in Brazil, where you've spent a lot of time, that have to do with huge implications in terms of the environmental significance of them. Maybe you just jump in and tell me that you want to talk about.
Let me jump in and tell you.
Yeah.
Usually I don't like to talk about these things until they're completed.
Yeah.
But this is something that I think is so exciting and long-term.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what it is. It'll probably outlive both of us. So in terms of implementing it. Very simply, what we are doing is introducing a new kind of technology in which we can turn deserts and semi-deserts green with trees and plants, commercial plants.
Yeah.
And we're trying to package this with Kelso's and Norm Kurland's idea of making the people involved owners. So let me tell you a little about the project, and do it in terms of the background of Brazil, as you said, a place I've been doing research in for the last 50 years.
You've been a lot of the time in northeast Brazil, which has arid areas up there. Yeah,
well,
right.
This is the point.
They think of jungle.
Northeast, If you think of the map of Brazil, in the northwestern half, you have the huge Amazon rainforest.
Yeah.
But to the east, you have a semi-arid area that is huge. It's the size of France and Germany combined.
That's a lot of land.
That's a lot of land, but it's densely populated. And it's the major area of poverty in Brazil.
Okay.
So the whole background to this is our working with issues of social justice.
Okay.
And I'm kind of broker on this project because the technology was developed by a group of people in Arizona under the leadership of a man named Dr. Carl Hodges.
Okay.
It's called seawater agriculture.
Seawater?
Seawater, using ocean water to do agriculture and to plant a group of plants called halophytes, which thrive on salt water. And one particularly called Salicornia, you can plant in areas of desert, semi-desert, using water from the ocean.
Wow.
And the idea is to begin by building canals, reverse rivers, essentially. Rivers usually run from high ground in the interior where rainwater accumulates and run down into the lowlands, into the ocean.
Right.
The idea here is to reverse it and to pump water from the ocean inland so that you irrigate the land with salt water.
Okay, that's
now you begin.
Like,
you begin after you set up the pumping system and dig the drainage, and we're beginning with a piece of land where a river comes into the ocean, but like most of the area where you have periodic droughts, there's never enough water in the river and it runs dry and the ocean backs up into it. So you have salt water in the area, and we're going to extend this to create a river running inland from the ocean. Now, this takes a certain amount of energy to pump it.
I would think it would, and also the plants.
The plants. I'll get to the plants in just a moment.
Are they some new hybrids or something?
No, I'll tell you what the plants are. Because Carl Hodges has been working on these halophytes.
Halophytes. I've never heard of that term. Yeah.
And these are, again, plants that thrive in salt water.
There's seaweed in the ocean that thrives, and kelp and all kinds.
You raise seaweed, but it's the specific form of halophyte called Salicornia and mangrove trees, which also grow in salt water we intend to plant. Okay. But the whole procedure begins creating the river that runs inland.
Have there been these kind of things in historic times?
No, there have been in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Dr. Hodges and his group have been trying it, and they have had projects primarily in the Middle East, off the Gulf of Africa, in Eritrea, in Egypt, and in other parts of the Near East.
With these halophytes again?
With these halophytes, particularly Salicornia.
Salicornia.
Okay. And if anybody in viewing wants to see this, just Google seawater agriculture or the Seawater Foundation, and you'll be able to see videos that show you how it works.
Has there been any of this in the historical record?
Yeah.
Of this kind of thing?
Yeah. Well,
like in Egyptian times?
No. This is a recent development.
Why recent? Why isn't it always? But what new has made it possible?
All right. The combination of the technology and the use of it. Give me a minute to try, to outline it for you. And I was just going to add that we think, or at least we hope to try at the beginning when we build the river going inland, to use solar energy for the energy, because this is an area where there are 350 days of sun.
Right, sure, you're right on the equator almost.
Sense because they're already using wind, because these are winds that blow off the Atlantic across the north coast of Brazil.
To bring the energy.
To bring the
pumps,
energy. So the idea is that you build the river, but you begin it by doing aquaculture. That is raising primarily shrimp and fish fin like tilapia that you then raise in cages to provide a cash crop. And it's the excrements from the fish and the shrimp that enriches the salt water that you're pumping inland. Within a year, you get a first crop of fish and shrimp for commercial markets.
Within a year?
Within a year. Along with this, we are developing fish markets in Brazil, because unfortunately Brazil is in a position now where other ships from other countries come in and fish in their waters and buy up the fish, so that Brazil has to import fish. So we've got a project of building fish markets that the shrimp and tilapia that we are raising will be sold through, and will also create a profit for the enterprise that we are creating. Then the water, the salt water, is shipped through the canal or river inland and used to irrigate the semi-arid area in the back of the area. So you're pumping from the ocean, if this is the coast, and you're pumping the water inland, the fish and the shrimp, the aquaculture is done close to the ocean, and then you begin to extend it by irrigating land inland, and you plant the salicornia and the mangrove trees. You can kind of intersperse them.
Do you build like a mangrove swamp or something?
Essentially what you're building is a mangrove forest.
Forest, yeah.
Using salt water in the semi-desert area.
Where there hasn't been any forest.
No, this is barren, essentially. So what you're doing, and of course remember, as you pump salt water from the oceans, you're lowering the level of the oceans, which are rising. And if you begin to think of it, there are thousands and thousands of square miles of desert along the ocean coast throughout the world.
Right.
The future of the idea is that if you get enough of these going, you're compensating for the rising of the sea levels by using salt water to irrigate lands that are not productive now. And the key thing here is the land is not productive, and by grazing the mangrove trees, you're beginning to fix soil in the ground, and you're taking carbon out of the atmosphere, which is another part of the problem of global warming.
True.
So this contributes environmentally in addition to everything else. Now, the salicornia that you plant.
What is salicornia?
Salicornia is a particular type of plant. It is green, and the critical thing about it is it grows in salt irrigated dry land.
And it's been around for thousands of years?
It's been around a long time, and it produces a seed out of which you can make a cooking oil, which has the composition similar to safflower oil, but also the seed you can use to feed animals. It's an excellent ration for animals, and this area, by the way, of northeast Brazil where we're working, has a large cattle industry. But the problem is that you depend on scrub growth in this barren area, and every time you have a drought, the cattle die off. Okay. What we're able to do then is to use the salicornia seeds as a feed for cattle. And what becomes important here is that Brazil is one of the largest exporters of cattle in the world.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yes.
You think Argentina or something?
No, because what they have done in Brazil is cut down tropical forest to create grazing land for cattle. Well, our hope is that if you can raise salicornia on barren land, you can move the cattle industry to the northeast and develop both cattle for Brazil, dairy cattle to produce milk and dairy products, and as contributing to your export industry.
Why isn't this, what do you call it, salicornia?
Salicornia.
Salicornia, has that been known for hundreds of years, and why hasn't this been done by
because
people
in areas where you can raise plants normally, where there is abundant rainfall, there are other more efficient crops. The key to salicornia is that you can raise it where you can't grow anything else using salt water. And what has to be added here
does that appear? Is that just tropical, or does it appear in mangrove swamps up in Georgia or something?
No, actually, I'm not sure exactly where else it is grown. But it is domesticated. It has been domesticated and grown by Carl Hodges, who has developed specific varieties for specific environments.
Oh, maybe a mutant or something.
So it could be this way.
Well, hallelujah,
But in addition to this, the seeds from the salicornia can be used to make biofuels.
The seeds.
The seeds. You can grind them up into oils that can then be used to make biofuels, the equivalent of our ethanol used in automobiles. Brazil already...
Is there a lot of bulk to the plants? Are they large?
There's bulk, and you can use it for mulch. You can use it for a lot of other things in agriculture. I just want to add...
They tried it with corn.
Let me just add...
It didn't work so well with ethanol.
Well, here's the difference. When we use corn, you take corn that you feed to people and people are dependent on, and you use it to make biofuel, ethanol. So you take away from human food production. Again, the Salicornia, which nobody else grows.
It's not used for anything else.
No. And so here you can grow it.
It hasn't been used.
You can make it into fuels, and Brazil already manufactures automobiles that run on either a biofuel or gasoline. Remember, it was only recently that Brazil discovered offshore oil. So then now they're beginning to produce their own oil. Before this, it was all imported, very expensive. So they developed growing sugarcane to make biofuels. And what that means is you're taking land that you can grow either sugar or other things that feed people. You can take this now and use it to produce foods while you use the semi-desert areas of the Northeast to raise the Salicornia out of which you make the biofuel.
Boy, that's really interesting. That could apply to a lot of other places around the world, seacoasts around the world.
It certainly can, and this is the idea. And unfortunately, as I said before, the people in Arizona have been trying it, but haven't been invited into places like Eritrea, which are war zones, and they had civil wars.
That's hard to work in a war zone.
You don't survive. In fact, some of the videos that you could see if you Google Seawater Agriculture or Seawater Foundation show you the project that they developed in Eritrea where they turned the deserts green. And then you had a war, and that was the end of it. And this is where I stepped in with them and said, okay, why can't we do it in Northeast Brazil? And when I spoke to Carl Hodges about this, he says, yeah, I visited Northeast Brazil many years ago. It's a fantastic place. So we moved ahead, and I've been working with friends who I have known for the last 30 years, trying to begin to implement it. And what we have done is we have gotten the help of the government of the state of Ceará, and the governor. It's one of the states in the Northeast, and the capital city is Fortaleza, a place where I've spent a lot of time.
I know you have,
And we've gotten tremendous cooperation. But what I added in talking to the people at the Seawater Foundation in terms of doing it in Brazil, I said, look, ordinarily, when you try a project like this, you open it up to investors in the capitalist system who come in with money because they want to make money. There's money, as we've seen, to be made from this, from the shrimp, from the tilapia, from the biofuels, from the cattle, from the cement industry that you can develop, all kinds of things.
Is there a particular advantage around the tilapia and fish farms that aren't? Because fish farming is taking off all over the world, particularly in the equatorial areas. Doing very well. Why would you need to have a new environment? Because it's doing very well. Tilapia is all over the place.
It's integrated with the seawater agriculture in that the excrements from the fish and the shrimp enrich the seawater and serve to help fertilize the tilapia and the mangroves.
Okay, well, what's used to feed the shrimp? What's the source of the food for the shrimp and the
algae?
Fish? Algae.
Algae, which again can be produced. It's light photosynthesis, and you can produce it very quickly, and this becomes the feed for the aquaculture, the fish farms. So this all, again, this is a whole integrated project that they have been working on, And what I'm dealing with is the application in Brazil, to which I added our good friend Norman Kurland's adaptation of Louis Kelso in terms of making people owners of a productive
local
process.
People in the geographical
Local
area?
People. So we're setting this up, and this now is in the stage of a proposal that we have submitted to the Development Bank of Brazil and the World Bank, so that when we want to get, rather than raising funds in the market, we want a grant from the Bank of the Northeast or the World Bank to begin the project and establish it, so that we can start with the idea of the earnings of the project eventually will pay off anything we get from the bank.
Well, how out in time is the return going to be of that order? Well, normally in the business cycle, they would like to think 5 to 7 years they might get payback on their investment.
We're pretty sure we can do it within less than that.
With less than that even, okay? Okay, well that's really interesting.
The idea is after paying off, or if you extend the payoff to the banks if they're willing to do it, we're doing it in the form of a corporation, a company with stock ownership. And owning the stock will be a small portion going to the Seawater Agriculture Foundation or its designee for their contribution. Also, the federal government of Brazil, which is involved in helping to establish this, and the state governments, whichever state governments become involved.
Maybe a sort of funds for their public sector activity.
No, and also what has happened in the state of Ceará, they have offered us state-owned land in this area that I was talking about earlier.
Large tract?
For a period of 20 years. We don't know how large it is yet, but at least to get us started. For 20 years, they have given us this plot of land to use to set up the project, which is their contribution. But the key to the whole thing is that we want the people who live in the area to be the major owners of the stock of the corporation.
Well, I heard you a certain amount of whatever is to be gained is going to be to the various people that make up the foundation and that. And that.
Right.
Now, how is the distribution of some ownership stake in terms of the population of the area? That's the general society, not the people on the inside.
No, not the people on
what
the inside.
percentage would be, and how
live there?
How would that be distributed?
This
and
has
dispersed?
to be the exact percentage has to be worked out. But we really feel that the bulk of the ownership will be distributed to the people who live in the area.
I should think they want some details on that, wouldn't they? Why don't you just take it all, the people who make up the foundation take all the money for themselves? Why would they bother distributing it to the masses?
Okay.
You know, like a good capitalist.
Thank you. Because
or do that under the table even.
My involvement in this is...
To assure against that.
Because I'm against it, and I've been working with people in the Northeast who are concerned with issues of social justice.
Okay, you have been all of your career.
One side project. Yeah. I have
so you're Johnny on the spot.
Student.
John Don.
This is, we put it, I have a former student who has been running university study abroad programs for the last 20 years, where American students go down to take a semester abroad in Brazil. He has the only study abroad program that focuses on issues of social justice.
Wow, only?
Oh, the only
There's need for more, don't you think?
Obviously, what we're
I'm making
trying
a joke,
to do,
son. Yeah.
No, what we're trying to do, again, applying for foundation money to do it, is to expand it to include European students, college students, and Brazilian college students, to get them all together in a course on social justice issues in the part of Brazil that is the most impoverished part of the country.
It'd be like a kind of co-op or something where the people involved in the local area would be benefited by getting some ownership of that overall project?
Not like a co-op.
No.
They're going to become shareholders.
Shareholders. Okay.
They're going to become shareholders in the company.
Absentee.
No.
They're not going to be. They're not going to be working in it. Or
they may be working. We're going to have to be creating large numbers of jobs.
You are.
Usually,
you've got projected what that would be.
We're going to need people to plant and
how
harvest.
How many jobs? How many acres? How many tons of this and that? Or what are the dimensions of the thing? Is it a little mom and pop thing, or is it a great big project?
This is a great big project.
Okay. Well,
this is going to begin with something
like the Hoover
10
Dam
acres. Again, near the coast, and expand inland to as far as we can go. And the idea is to expand it in the future so that you continue that river running inland. You build alternative rivers from the ocean with salt water to irrigate more and more of this northeastern semi-desert.
Okay, just a real simple question. How in the hell do you get the water to run against gravity?
That's pumps.
Oh, pumps. That's a lot of pumping.
This is a very old
Where else
technology.
is that done? They got polders in Netherlands, but mostly the rivers of the world go by gravity,
down.
don't they?
And
you're going to go against gravity? Where do they do that now? Is there a history of that?
All over the world we use pumps to pump water.
Yeah, over
this is not anything
insignificant
new.
amounts and so forth?
Yes.
They do? Where?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, in all dams you use pumps and you use levees and you use all kinds of things to move water around. That's not the greatest difficulty. This is old technology that we know. It's the question of applying it in a new context where it has never been done before. That's the objective. You see, this is a combination of an engineering project.
You're going to get a river to run upstream.
Yeah.
I mean, uphill.
Essentially,
Where the hell does
what
it
we're
end?
going to be doing is working with the lowest areas possible, so they don't have to. You're not going to pump it up into mountains.
Yeah, right.
And again, there are huge
Is that done?
There are huge coastal areas around the world
where they do that.
Where not where they do it, where it can be done relatively simply. Well, this is economically in terms of the potential earnings of the entire project. And the idea of being able to develop using solar energy and wind energy as the driving force for the pumps that will pump the water.
Why hasn't it been done before?
We do this with fresh
why
water.
Has it been done anywhere else? Or have you got any model you're going on? Or anything?
I keep telling you that we have the model in Eritrea where it was done. We have the model in Egypt where it was started before the Arab Spring and then disintegrated. There are models for this, but again, unfortunately, the models were selected where the politics was unstable.
Why were they selected where the politics are so unstable? I mean, why wasn't it Baja California or something like that?
It wasn't Baja California.
Yeah, well, you could do it there.
Where the Vicente Fox administration funded it, and then when Fox was voted out of office, the new government decided it wasn't interested.
Okay, well, that's what's going to stop the Brazilian political force du jour to say, we're not interested anymore? And do you have to have a 100-year contract, or what?
Well, we've got a 20-year contract to start with, but the important thing, and this goes back to when I went down to Brazil last spring to talk about this and see whether I can develop interest, Brazil, remember, has a labor government.
Okay. Yeah.
Very different from what's happening in most of the world. It is a labor government that has introduced redistribution of wealth and they're growing. Limited term.
Is that Lula?
Lula and
there's a woman
Dilma, who has succeeded him and was elected. And they have
she's continuing his policy.
They have limited term cash transfers to poor people, something called the Bolsa Familia, which has been helping to eliminate poverty. That is, they give money to poor people to keep them alive.
Okay, yeah.
This is the social justice issue that we're concerned with.
So the social justice issue in your project.
We have a labor government in Brazil. There is a labor government, or a closely aligned to labor government, in the state of Ceará, in several other states and local governments, so that when I went down, I have a friend who is the chief of staff of a minister in Brasilia.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about the project and trying to explain this matter of local ownership, thinking that, oh my God.
Now, what's the advantage of the local ownership? Why not just have it all done through a bank in New York or something? I mean, why the local ownership?
Why the local
because
ownership?
You're tying into a social justice thing that's blowing in the wind in those countries and areas?
So that the people who live in the area will own stock in the company and will receive dividends from the earnings of the company.
They don't think. I don't think they wouldn't think they were going to do that in Eritrea when they set it up.
No, in Eritrea,
why do they set it up in politically unstable areas? And there's a political component
because
to it.
Authoritarian governments offered money for a technical project.
Yeah.
Understand, I am adding the social justice component.
Okay.
This becomes my reason for getting Brazil involved and working through people I know in Brazil. And the idea here is that, as I just was saying, in talking to my friend who's in Brasilia, he immediately jumped on this and said, oh, we even have a term for it. That's fantastic.
What's the term?
The term is, well, it's a solidarity economy, is the way it translates. But what in effect it means is that local people have an ownership stake in the productive process.
Oh, well, that's a wonderful thing to encourage. Yeah, that could be really good.
This is, as
and
I
the
say,
political
the
context,
reason,
even longer view, look out, seems to be that that's the staff. And Brazil's doing very well, thank you, now.
Yeah, and it is doing well economically. And it's got politicians who are concerned with saying it's not just a handful of rich people who are going to get ever richer with our American distribution upward of everything we produce and earn. We have people politically who are concerned with saying, we want everybody to get rich. We're interested in new things and new projects that will help enrich the country, including everybody.
Okay.
Now, so what you will get, as you're getting, you have stock markets in Brazil, you have most of the projects, particularly the agricultural projects, the cattle industry I talked about, the sugarcane industry that makes biofuels, the soybean industry, all of these are owned by handfuls of peoples and families who are taking off, just as in the United States, most of the wealth that's being created. What we're trying to do is to say, look, this is a new technology. It's a new industry.
The new technology is what's the new tech? You talked about a plant that grows it uniquely, and then you got to talk about a thing of rivers going uphill, and you got all. What's the new? What's the new?
The new technology
is the plant.
This new technology is what we call seawater agriculture.
Seawater
it is the package in which you use water from the oceans to grow products that are commercially valuable on land that is presently barren. In other words, it is taking this huge chunk of northeast Brazil that has people living on land that is mostly barren.
How can they live there very long? They're not going to be able to live there very long.
They live in poverty. They live in great poverty. And the idea is to help with this because, as I was saying, I'm working with people who are concerned with issues of social justice. Not only on the political level, not only on the educational level. I have friends, and these are things we've talked about before, who are working in slum areas with something that is called community therapy. These are development programs where you use a combination of psychiatry and anthropology to work with poor people in slums, Brazil's favelas, and begin to get them to understand that what seem to be psychological problems to them as individuals, that is being out of work and not being able to support your children and fighting with your wife and leaving your wife, all of these things are problems of individuals. They are trying to help them understand that these are really problems based on poverty.
Well, all right.
Poverty in an area, and somehow we've got to create new industries that will provide wealth, not just in the form of distributing money through capital and jobs, but helping to make people, large numbers of people, owners in the productive wealth so that they too will receive dividends, even if their wages are low. As Kelso said a long time ago, you get a combination of capital earnings and labor earnings that help provide people with the kind of incomes necessary to have a decent life in a market capitalist world.
Primarily by expanding capital ownership to those who haven't had it.
Right.
And that's a large issue that seems to be going unnoticed in the United States.
Well,
I mean, there seems to be very little. I mean, there is some, you know, there's some of the things going on that he tried to do, but the idea hasn't exactly taken off like Keynes.
And my point is that in the United States, you would be banging your head against the wall to introduce something like this.
No, but it might have ramifications when it comes.
It has tremendous ramifications. But, Harold, the idea here is that if we can get this going in Brazil and have a viable project earning wealth in which people share, it serves as a model how you can do it elsewhere. And then if people in the United States, Europe, or elsewhere begin to mobilize, as you're trying to do with Occupy Wall Street and others, to have something to hold up and say, this is the way we want to go. The problem here is we're out of ideas.
And also we're confronted with that thing that Mr. Keynes said to later his grandchildren, you're going to be confronted with technologically induced massive unemployment. And the only way we have legitimately in our thinking about our legitimate system that we supposedly represent historical legitimacy and so forth is the only way to get money to people in the mass is to have them have a job on the estate where the capital instruments are more and more relevant to actual production. This thing that's in Brazil being proposed, I suppose you've done feasibility and things like that. And is it capital intensive or is it labor intensive?
No, it's capital intensive.
It is capital intensive.
Capital intensive.
Okay, so that's interesting that it is because the whole trend of the world is to move toward capital intensive productive processes.
We will create
and
jobs.
You need to have somebody to relate them to it. But the jobs could be almost incidental to the fact that the capital ownership is being dispersed.
Usually,
and you're going to run herd on that posse that's going to make sure that those distribution of those ownership shares are going to go to the actual people rather than being skimmed off by some hustlers or something.
Yes.
You're going to be the sheriff and chief.
No. This is why you have to.
You understand what I'm saying?
I know.
Yeah.
This is why we have to be very careful in setting up the ownership of this new technology. And this is why we are.
The new, what is, now, I got
the
John,
new technology,
what's his name?
seawater agriculture.
No. I think I had a friend I did a program with, it was really good. Can't remember his name. John, Molly's dad. John, well, you could call it out, Paul, if you're in the thing. John, anyway, he did shrimp farming. He started shrimp farming, invested down in Panama City and everything. And in the end, he couldn't make a go of it because now it's become, he was just pioneering in that. Hell of an interesting book. He thought he could create a staple, a new staple source of protein. With the fish farming and that. But it got to be where the advantages were so to the countries on the equator that they would have 3 times, they could get 3, he couldn't compete. Just couldn't compete in terms of the market. It's all being done in Thailand and that kind of stuff. That's an established industry, fish farming and shrimp farming.
The only advantage of the fish farming
John
component.
Cheshire, I think is
Okay.
Yeah.
The fish farming in the project is it's part of this larger project.
Yeah.
And it all fits together.
Have you
it's
got
the integration that
Yeah.
becomes critical.
Okay.
When I refer to a new technology, I'm referring
to the
whole package of
including finance.
Well, the financing, obviously, this is why it's taking so long, because we don't want to turn and say, hey, you investors out there, we're going to make you more money. So that you can continue to exploit the poor people who are going to be your workers.
There'd be a lot of people willing to do that if they're
And by the way, in all of this, if you think of it as the hope, the fantasy,
a hope of which there can be others,
this is that it's not just going to be the people who are working in the fields.
It'll be the general society. No, it's a model by which
that the teachers, the artists, the musicians, all will have an income.
From ownership.
From the ownership.
That's going to have to be something that's going to have to be faced in this country. Again, all you ever hear, we're in an election season now, and all you hear about getting things in order is getting jobs.
That's right.
I saw a terribly depressing thing on television the other day, Frontline, about education. It's all about how you're going to create jobs. And the thing is that the jobs are not going to be there in order to distribute income. You have to have some alternative way to distribute it. Some people say, let's just tax people high and distribute it through giveaways and everything, or transfer payments and everything.
And remember,
but the other answer is they could form capital in a way where the ownership is democratically dispersed among the people as a way of distributing the needed demand to clear the market.
Right.
Is that not right?
Yeah.
That's something we're not ever facing. All they're talking about is getting jobs. Everybody's talking that.
We have already had a tax revolt in the United States where people aren't paying taxes because it was being redistributed to help poor people. This is something against what is happening in the United States. As I said to you, this is a kind of project that I wouldn't dream of introducing in the United States, not because it's not good, not because we don't need it, but because culturally we're in no position to accept it. And
that's very interesting because that's a huge issue. Lots larger than any, because the assumption is whatever is going to have the political high ground in the United States is going to be some element, something which they're going to do, some charisma or something that's going to create a lot of jobs for everybody. They just assume that. It may be that the tide of history is not going to be there, and that the means by which historical legitimacy going into the future is going to be determined on an alternative way than this major assumption that motivates the entire political process in the United States of America and most of the world, and that's a model that could have resonancy, that create the same way the United States of America stood up to the feudal order that had been inherited 1,000 years after Rome, stood up to and said, we're going to have a new system, a major transformation along the lines of the thing that you're suggesting this project would be able to introduce in a unique way.
This is what
Does
we're
that
hoping.
make some
this
sense?
is what we're hoping for.
Okay. Yeah,
and
good.
Again,
that'd be a model. Yeah.
It's just the fact that historically, Brazil is at a point of time where, as you mentioned, Lula, where they were able over the last 20 years, and remember it was 1985,
that's right,
Brazil had a military government.
Right, I remember.
It was only in the late 1980s that they were able to throw out the military, create a democratic government, and then Lula and the Labor Party were able to move in and mobilize enough people in the country to get him elected president for 8 years and to get Dilma to get elected this time around and continue with policies that were concerned with the poor.
And
now, what they also
okay, we said that they're also doing well, but they're also doing well not only by the fact that they're doing something for the poor, but they've also got an economic system that's going in normal terms.
What I also was going to say, they have also accommodated with the capital markets and the rest of the world that they're able to bridge it now. And my point is that politically they are open to new ideas that we are not.
Could this work like in the west coast of North Africa, Mauritania or someplace, Senegal or something like that?
The entire Sahara region.
The entire Sahara and even parts of Australia and other places. That would be in the more, that kind of thing. It's an interesting idea. Has there been, I suppose there must have been some, what do you call them? What do they call those studies? Feasibility studies done about it, or models put out, or something like that, in order to understand in that. And is there sites and things with that kind of information? Some of the modeling of what the likelihood and the projections are.
Them. Just take
Maybe
a look
worth
at
doing it again.
Seawater Agriculture Foundation.
Here's what you're talking about. You don't have a specific site. There's not a specific site. You just Google. Is that what you say?
You just Google seawater agriculture.
All right. Google seawater agriculture. Right. That's all, and it'll come up.
And then you'll be able to get the Seawater Foundation, and they've got videos that will.
Do they have a
you,
website, the Seawater Foundation?
I guess so.
We ought to have that, don't you think? We ought to have that, or that would come up or something, right? That's the one
you're specifically
all that would
involved. Come up when you.
Is
Google
Norman involved with that? Norman Curlin?
No.
No, this is coming out of yours in some context.
Actually,
well, you've been working down there diligently for years.
I've been broker in all of this.
Yeah, good.
Between the technology people, the Brazil people, and my own sense of understanding of how Brazil works, how you can make things reasonable to liberal people in Brazil, that's much more difficult to do in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the BRIC.
Because we've run into a blank wall.
Yeah, that's one of the emerging BRIC countries and so forth. They're going to have more of an influence, like the United States had an influence beyond what the people of Europe thought they had, because the people of Europe thought they were historically legitimate. The United States, in its model, may not be historically legitimate in a major way that these other BRIC countries could prove
into the future.
Into the future.
Yeah.
You're projecting it out for 10, 20, 30 years?
30.
Or?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I'll be long dead.
And
hopefully that this will be a piece put in place that will help us move in directions that might help in terms of social justice.
Well, I do believe that the American Revolution helped inform the French Revolution. I mean, back in the homeland, as it were.
It helped inform people all over the world.
Yeah.
And now we've got to make the next step. And I think this is what is a major concern here, because we're at a point where we need a next step.
We need a major new step at the level of economic theory. Maybe more than anything else, the economic theory based upon a labor notion of distribution of income by labor is outdated, and that's serious. That's seriously catching up with us now, and it's structural. It's not just a matter of what policy is going to get that to happen.
And instead of arguing it theoretically with entrenched people, I think we have a place in the world where we can try it out as an experiment.
Well, I wish you all the very best.
If it works, say, look, folks, if you need a model to look at, take a look.
Okay, that's a great idea. I think it's a good thing to happen. I can see we could develop another. You have revolutionary implications. You got that thing out of Barcelona, too. That's a co-op thing.
That's a co-op.
That's a co-op. That's a different kind of model, but this is one that would apply to some of the other areas. And the thing is, it would get out of the swoon, or maybe it would have the people come. How did it happen? You're an anthropologist with a good historical sense, that we had the Enlightenment and so forth, and we had 1776, American Revolution was made, and it was Benjamin Franklin got the French to support us. That was a big turning thing. They made it, and that in turn, you had a lot of the royalty from the holdover from the feudal period, 1,000 years. But the American example informed Les Miserables in 1789 France. So you get something going in Brazil, there could be a thing that would inform, get support, and then it would inform, and it would jolt the American, the Agent regime. They used to call that for the Agent regime of the feudal order, We've got an ancient regime based upon an economic model that is seriously and fundamentally and structurally out of date with what the future requires.
Okay.
And what was coming from the United States to France in 1789 was the inklings of a revolutionary movement that was going to be qualitatively transformative and established a new basis for what system is historically and future-looking legitimate. So that the whole system that we're trying to impose on the world in its basic structure is not historically legit. That by that the Western developed world is not viable, is not historically legitimate. Its time is up. It needs to have a new thing, and we could get Henry George, and we could get distribution of some ownership by people of the means of production. Systems that can have massive technological displacement of labor and production, get over our swoon to the labor theory of value, and get down to one where there could be the forming of capital and distribution of buying power to the people so that we could clear the market of what can be produced technologically within an ecological order and bring about a system rather than blowing the whole thing up with the weapons where we fight over reifying the outdated institutions. Worthy of consideration by thoughtful people.
That's right. This is why we're trying this as an experiment to say, look, when Americans begin to react to what's happened, when Europeans take to the street and begin to react, and unfortunately they have very few models to turn to. And we'd love to be able to say, here's something that works. You could use it as a model.
Do you ever feel like a treasonous person to the established order of your home country? Do you feel like you're projecting something that could be undercutting the legitimacy of the established order of the United States of America as the leading nation in the world, and all their running dog allies?
The established order of the world.
We're going to need an investigating committee here, Mr. McCarthy.
The established order of the world is impoverishing far too many of the citizens of the world and leaving them out of the market system that was created. This becomes one small step in trying to reverse that, and I think in the long run it is easier to see this as something positive. Because, by the way, as Robert Ashford pointed out a long time, when poor people get money, they stimulate industry, and everybody else benefits from it.
Well, of course, that's the problem we have, is it not? Is we don't have we talk about supply and demand. And if the people don't have the money to buy what can be produced, you're in deep doo-doo, right?
So here we have a way, and again, without stepping on anyone's toes, we're not taking over anybody's business. We're creating a new one, business that, if we do it this way, again, the idea of saying, hey, guys, you could do this, and everybody benefits.
Yeah, but then when you start saying that, you're some sort of idealist, or you've been reading More again, Thomas More, and Utopia, and all these kind of dewy-eyed, idealistic things about it. Can't we all get along?
This is why I use the word fantasy.
Yeah, and it's not
the beginning.
No, I don't think you should call it.
I think it's possible.
No, don't call it.
It's my fantasy.
I don't think we ought to call it fantasy at all, because it's in the highest order of questioning things and everything like that. I just don't know that you're likely to be getting on somebody's list or something if you actually, and I think a lot of that kind of thinking might come out of places like here, if I might say, public access. I think it might come out of some of the public access here and some of the academics, because the intellectual community has been co-opted. Because one of the things holding them back from saying anything questioning the system is that they're all wrapped up at universities getting their tenure and getting their grants and getting their things like that.
Well, I hope
the liberal community has been co-opted from coming forth with systems thinking that could be questioning the whole thing.
I agree with
and you and your cohorts, your rabble rousing, and you're coming from a liberal, a social justice perspective. You could become the makers of a context that would inform the whole of the society back, like the same way the United States of America did influence the French Revolution, did it not?
And if I may,
it was of the time.
If I may say to your audience, if people are interested, this is a conversation to be continued, and I'm more than interested in continuing the conversation with anyone who wants to join in.
By all means. How can they contact you, sir?
I think you have my email.
We have the email at the very end, but why don't you give it now? That's one thing.
It's simple. It's sgreenfield222@aol.com.
Will you send them your CV?
No, I may send them articles
if they ask for, if they want for, would you send
if
that?
If they're interested, I'll send them
He's got a
papers on
CV,
this.
ladies and gentlemen. This is one little thing he's knocked off this weekend. You know, I mean, in his thinking and everything. He's got a CV that goes, I think, for 37 pages, 8 font of all the writing that he's done. You're talking to a major scholar here. I'd like to sing your praises.
We try.
No, you try.
We try.
I don't know how the hell you get time to come. I'm really honored you got time to come in to sit with me for an hour, because you could have written 3 articles in the time that you could have been home with your computer.
I have to tell you, as you know, I was very fortunate when I was a graduate student in anthropology at Columbia University. I had the opportunity to study with Karl Polanyi and Konrad Ahrensberg. And this has provided thinking, in addition to all of the other research that I have done. I should add Charles Wagley, who got me into Brazil.
And Wichtfogle. Didn't you? Oriental Despoty. Right. Major figures you've been in touch with.
So I've been very fortunate, and their thinking rubbed off on me. And so these are the places I'm going, and I feel very blessed that I had the opportunity as a poor kid from Brooklyn, to become a professional scholar and move in these areas and try these things.
Try these things towards social justice.
And I hope that it works.
And overturning.
Because I feel a great debt in having been given the opportunity by the existence of a free Brooklyn college to get an education, which enabled me to go on to Columbia University and do this.
Those were the days.
And we need more of that. We should return to this.
Now all you see is dead as far as the eye can see.
So these are the issues, and this is the background, and we just hope that we get the funding and we can do this and put it in place, and that it'll work.
May you raise a lot of trouble. May you raise a lot of trouble where it has to be raised. It's coming. It's bubbling up all over. It's coming. You're going to get a lot of system support from a lot of people who are going to see it a little different, but there's going to be a combination. Your pleasure to have the perceptions of one of New York's finest, if I may say. So that's Dr. Sidney M. Greenfield. You can see Professor Emeritus of Anthropologist, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Spirits with Scalpels. We didn't get to that, but his writing is so voluminous, and he's also one of the few people who's been able to pick up on the need for a new economic system that could include capital formation and manners by which ownership is distributed democratically to the whole of the society rather than to the few. And in that sense, he's very much ahead of history's curve. And thanks a lot for all your good work and for coming into the program.
My pleasure.
It has been truly in your pleasure. And one more time, give them the site for the foundation.
Look up seawater agriculture.
Just Google seawater agriculture.
Right.
And then bombard Mr. Greenfield with emails, and he will send you his CV. and you will be inundated with such good work he's done.
No, we will just talk about these issues.
Okay, good. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. That's really interesting, all that stuff. I didn't realize you've been putting all that together. You're a busy man. You're really good.
We try. Take this off.
Yeah. Well, they may have it. Keep it on. They may be still a little bit on there. What do you have the right time on your watch?
My watch has 5 minutes to 4.
Okay, we got to get out of here.
So we can
get 4.
Kicked out. So
yeah, we have to get out of here at 4.
May I unplug myself?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, okay. Go ahead. Seawater. There. See, they got it. We'll put that up on Seawater Agriculture.
Right.
Okay, we got that. That will be up on YouTube. We'll make sure that.